He, a skeptical tycoon, doubted goodness. She, a pure and innocent young woman, a flower vendor on the street, seen as simple. He observes her. Carol's smile and purity strike him. He sees her handle hardship without losing her sweetness, confronted with her unusual beauty. Against his cynical nature, the millionaire falls in love with her essence, feeling an overwhelming desire to protect her. Prepare for a twist where society and the past will try to destroy the tycoon's love for the innocent flower vendor. But the purity and goodness of this love will prove that the essence of the soul is the true treasure. Watch this story to the end. You will be amazed by this story. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing. The morning sun bathed the bustling streets of Manhattan when Carol Mendez carefully arranged her flowers in a small plastic bucket. At 25, she knew every stone of that sidewalk on the corner of Fifth Avenue where she had set up her spot every day since she was 18. Her hands, calloused from work, delicately arranged the red roses and white carnations she had bought at the flower market before dawn. "Good morning, Ms. Carroll," shouted the boy from the newsstand. She responded with a shy nod, the same sweet smile she maintained even on the most difficult days. The money she earned barely covered the rent for the small apartment she shared with her two younger siblings, Miguel, 16, and Ana, 14. Since their parents died in a car accident 3 years ago, Carol had taken on the responsibility of caring for the family. It was a life of constant sacrifices. She woke up at 5 in the morning to go to the wholesale flower market, chose the freshest flowers with the little money she had, and spent the whole day on the street, facing sun, rain, and the indifference of the hurried people. But Carol never lost hope or kindness. She believed that each flower sold brought a little beauty to someone's life. 15 miles away, on the top floor of a mirrored skyscraper on Wall Street, Michael Vance finished yet another meeting that would move millions. At 38, he had built an empire that began with a small tech company inherited from his father and had grown into one of the largest investment holdings in the country. His mahogany desk reflected the coldness of his office, impeccable, organized, without a single personal photo. Michael looked through the panoramic window that dominated the city. Down below, people looked like ants in their insignificant lives. He had learned, through years of betrayals and self-serving relationships, that everyone had a price. Women approached him for money, businessmen for power, friends for influence. Loneliness had become his most faithful companion. "Mr. Vance," said Helen, his assistant, entering the office with a tablet in hand. "Your meeting with the Japanese investors has been rescheduled. Traffic is impossible on Fifth Avenue." Michael sighed. Once again, he would have to face the chaos of New York City to get to the hotel where the meeting would take place. He grabbed the keys to his Ferrari and went down to the private parking garage. Driving was one of the few things that still gave him pleasure. The total control over the machine, the speed, the precision, the traffic was truly terrible. On Fifth Avenue, Michael was stopped at a red light, drumming his fingers on the Italian leather steering wheel. That's when he saw her. Across the street, a young woman was arranging flowers in a bucket, moving with a natural grace that contrasted with the desperate rush of the passers-by. She wore a simple light blue dress, and her brown hair was tied in a casual ponytail. There was nothing extraordinary about her, at least not at first glance, but when Carol raised her face and smiled at a lady who stopped to buy roses, something in Michael's chest contracted. It was a genuine smile, without calculation, without ulterior motives, pure joy in making someone happy. There was a light in her eyes that he hadn't seen in years, an innocence that he thought was extinct in the world. The light turned green, but Michael couldn't take his eyes off her. A car honked behind him, forcing him to move on, but the image remained etched in his mind. During the meeting with the Japanese investors, he found himself thinking about that smile, that moment of purity in the midst of urban chaos. For 3 consecutive days, Michael changed his route to pass by the corner where Carol sold her flowers. He watched her from afar, fascinated by the way she treated each customer with attention, as if they were the most important person in the world. He saw how she shared her sandwich with a homeless person, how she helped elderly people cross the street, how her eyes lit up when a child stopped to smell her flowers. She was completely different from all the women he had ever known. There was no pose, no game of seduction, no interest in impressing anyone. Carol simply existed in her natural goodness, and that awakened in Michael something he thought he had lost forever: the ability to admire someone without cynicism. On Thursday, he made an impulsive decision that would change both of their lives forever. He parked the car in a nearby space and walked to the corner where Carol was arranging her flowers. When she raised her eyes and saw him approaching, Michael felt his heart race in a way that hadn't happened since his adolescence. "Good morning," he said, with a voice softer than he intended. "Your flowers are the most beautiful I've ever seen around here." Carol blushed slightly, surprised by the attention of the elegant man in the impeccable suit and watch that cost more than she earned in 2 years. "Thank you, sir. Can I help you with something?" The simplicity of the question, asked with crystal clear sincerity, was like a punch to Michael's stomach. This woman really had no idea who he was. There was no recognition, no calculated interest, just a florist doing her job with dedication. "Yes," he replied, knowing that he was about to cross a line of no return. "I'd like all of them." Carol blinked several times, certain that she had misunderstood. "All of them, sir?" "All the flowers," Michael confirmed, taking his wallet out of his inside jacket pocket. "How much will that be?" Carol's hands trembled slightly as she calculated. It was more money than she made in an entire week. That's $250, sir. Are you sure?" Michael handed her $300 bills without flinching. "Keep the change." He paused, watching her incredulous expression. "Who are the flowers for?" I don't know. You bought them all, sir." Carol was visibly confused, holding the money as if it would disappear at any moment. "Then they're yours," said Michael, surprising himself with the spontaneous decision. "Consider it a gift." "But I can't accept this," Carol protested, trying to return the money. "It's too much money and I don't even know your name." "Michael," he replied, extending his hand. "Michael Vance." Carol hesitated before shaking his hand. Hers was small and calloused, but the grip was firm. "Carol Mendez. Nice to meet you, Mr. Vance." Over the following days, Michael returned religiously to Carol's corner. He always bought flowers, sometimes one, sometimes all, and tried to strike up a conversation. Carol, initially wary, began to get used to his presence. She discovered that he was different from the rich men she imagined. He listened when she spoke, asked questions about her family, showed genuine interest in her life. "Why do you come here every day?" Carol asked one rainy afternoon, when Michael appeared with an elegant umbrella to protect her. Michael was silent for a moment, fighting the urge to be completely honest. "Your flowers brighten my day," he partially lied. The truth was, she brightened his days, but that sounded too dangerous to admit. Carol smiled. That smile that made Michael question everything in his life. "You must have a very lucky girlfriend, receiving flowers every day." "I don't have a girlfriend," he replied, more abruptly than he intended. "I don't have time for relationships." "That's a shame," Carol said sincerely. "A kind man like you deserves someone special." The innocence of the comment hit Michael like an arrow. She really saw him as kind, not as a predator or a calculating man. She had no idea of his wealth, his position in society, or how many women would kill for 5 minutes of his attention. The daily visits did not go unnoticed. Helen, his assistant, began to make subtle comments about the delays in meetings. Robert Vance, his uncle and financial advisor, noticed the change in his nephew's behavior. "Michael, you're different," Robert observed during a dinner at the club. "More distracted. I hope it's nothing that compromises the business." "I'm fine, Uncle," Michael replied, cutting a piece of salmon without appetite. Great, because Patricia Almeida was asking about you. The senator's daughter, remember? It would be a very advantageous union for the family. Michael had known Patricia since childhood, blonde, elegant, a graduate of the Sorbonne with a cold and calculated beauty, exactly the type of woman his family would approve of and who would leave him completely empty. Meanwhile, Carol faced her own pressures. Miguel, her brother, had noticed the extra flowers she brought home. "Where did these roses come from, Carol?" he asked suspiciously. "You can't sell even half of what you usually buy." "A special client," she replied, avoiding details. "Someone who appreciates flowers." "Be careful, sis," Miguel warned, serious beyond his 16 years. "Rich men don't do favors for free. They always want something in return." Her brother's words echoed in Carol's mind all week. She began to question Michael's intentions, to wonder why an obviously successful man would waste time with a flower vendor. When he appeared on Friday, she was more reserved than usual. "Did something happen?" Michael asked, immediately noticing the change. "Why do you do this?" Carol asked directly. "Why do you buy my flowers every day? Why do you talk to me?" The question caught Michael off guard. He saw in her eyes a mixture of hope and fear, as if she were preparing for a disappointment. For a moment he considered lying, making up a safe excuse. But the purity of her gaze demanded honesty. "Because you remind me that there is still goodness in the world," he said, the words coming out before he could censor them. Carol was silent, absorbing the answer. There was a vulnerability in his voice that surprised her, a sadness hidden behind the sophisticated facade. "You seem very lonely," she observed softly. "I am," Michael admitted, surprised by his own honesty. At that moment, the two understood that something had changed irrevocably between them. It was no longer just politeness or curiosity. It was a real, dangerous connection that threatened the carefully constructed worlds of both of them. The moment was interrupted by Michael's phone. Helen was calling, desperate. "Mr. Vance, where are you? The meeting with the Koreans started 15 minutes ago." Michael hung up, annoyed. Carol watched the transformation in his face, seeing the ruthless businessman quickly replace the vulnerable man who had revealed himself moments before. "I need to go," he said, already walking away. "Of course," Carol replied, trying to hide her disappointment. "Have a good day, Mr. Vance." Michael stopped, turned, and stared at her intently. Can I see you tomorrow? Away from here, I mean. To talk." Carol felt her heart race. She knew she was stepping on dangerous ground, that there were worlds separating them, but there was something in his eyes that prevented her from refusing. "I work here every day," she said carefully. "I don't have much free time." "Then I'll come here," Michael decided. "Tomorrow when you finish. Can we get coffee?" Carol nodded, not knowing that she had just accepted an invitation that would change her life forever. As Michael rushed to his meeting, late for the first time in years, both knew they had crossed a line from which there would be no return. That night, Carol lay in her narrow bed, thinking about the mysterious man who had entered her life. Miguel and Anna slept in the next room, and she could hear their quiet breathing. It was for them that she fought every day. It was for them that she couldn't afford to dream of impossibilities. But for the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to be seen, really seen, by someone. What it would be like not to have to fight the world alone. At the same moment, 30 miles away, Michael was in his penthouse apartment, looking at the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He had everything money could buy, but he couldn't stop thinking about the simplicity of Carol's smile, about the way she had looked at him when he admitted his loneliness. For the first time in his adult life, Michael Vance was genuinely interested in getting to know someone, not for what that person could do for him, but for what she was. And that terrified him more than any risky deal he had ever made. The next day, their lives would intertwine irreversibly, beginning a story that would test the limits of love, trust, and the very definition of happiness. The corner coffee shop was small and noisy. very different from the refined restaurants that Michael frequented. Carol had suggested the place, and he had accepted without hesitation, curious to know her world. Sitting at a worn Formica table, they seemed like characters from distinct universes who had met by chance. "I never imagined I'd walk into a place like this," Michael admitted, observing the peeling tiles and the handwritten menu hanging on the wall. "It's simple, but Mrs. Davis makes the best coffee in the neighborhood," Carol said, slightly embarrassed. "Sorry if it's not what you're used to." "No need to apologize," Michael replied, surprising himself with his sincerity. "Actually, it's comforting." Carol added sugar to her coffee and stirred slowly, thoughtfully. "Can I ask an indiscreet question?" "Sure." "Why doesn't a man like you have a family, children, a wife? It seems like you have everything to be happy." The question hit Michael like a well-aimed blow. He was silent for a long moment, turning the cup between his hands. Carol waited patiently, unhurried, in the way she had learned to give people space to open up. "I was engaged once," he said finally, his voice lower. "Adriana. 3 years of relationship. I found out on the eve of the wedding that she was cheating on me with my best friend and business partner. They planned everything from the beginning. She would get half the assets in the divorce. He would take over the business." Carol felt her heart clench. "I'm so sorry. Since then, I've learned that everyone has a price. Everyone wants something in return." Michael stared at her directly. "Until you meet someone who doesn't seem to want anything." "Maybe because I really don't want anything," Carol said simply. "I have everything I need. My siblings, my work, my dignity." It was the first time Michael had heard someone talk about having almost nothing as if it were abundance. Carol's perspective intrigued and haunted him at the same time. "What about you?" he asked. "Have you never fallen in love? Never wanted to build your own family?" Carol hesitated, nervously fiddling with the strap of her canvas bag. It's complicated." "How so?" "I've never had time to think about myself," she explained, the words coming out slowly. "Since our parents died, my life is taking care of Miguel and Ana. They need to finish their studies, have a chance in life. I can't afford to get distracted." Michael realized that there was something more, a hesitation in her voice that suggested unrevealed secrets. "But you're still young, Carol. You deserve to be happy." "Happiness is a luxury," she replied, with a maturity that contrasted with her age. "Survival is a necessity." During the next 2 hours, they talked about everything and nothing. Carol talked about her siblings, about the simple dreams she secretly cultivated. Michael shared stories of his lonely childhood, raised by nannies while his parents built their business empire. "You know what's strange?" Carol said, playing with the sugar dispenser. "You have everything I'll never have, but you seem as sad as I sometimes feel." The observation was so accurate that Michael felt a lump in his throat. Maybe sadness is universal. It just changes its address. When they got up to leave, Michael insisted on accompanying her to the bus stop. On the way, Carol tripped on a broken sidewalk and he caught her by the arm. The simple touch sent an electric current through both of them, a moment of physical connection that confirmed what they both already knew. There was something inevitable growing between them. "Carol," Michael said as the bus approached, "can I see you again? Tomorrow?" "I work tomorrow," she replied, but there was a shy smile on her lips. "Then I'll show up to buy flowers." On the crowded bus, Carol rested her head against the foggy window and allowed herself to dream for a few minutes. But reality soon set in. Miguel and Ana were waiting for her at home, hungry and with homework. She had responsibilities that she couldn't simply ignore because of a man, however kind he seemed. In his penthouse apartment, Michael walked to the balcony and looked in the direction where he knew Carol was. For the first time in years, he felt alive, but also vulnerable. He was allowing himself to feel something for a woman who lived in a world completely different from his. A woman who had no idea who he really was. On Monday, when Michael arrived at Carol's corner, He found only the empty bucket and no sign of her. A candy vendor on the opposite corner told him that she had rushed out earlier, looking worried. Michael felt a strange anxiety taking over him. He asked some people in the neighborhood until he got the information that Carol lived in a boarding house a few blocks away. Going against all his instincts as a cautious man, he went after her. He found her in the narrow hallway of the building, talking quietly to an older woman. Carol was visibly distressed, holding a piece of paper in her hand. "Carol?" he called, and she turned, surprised. "Mr. Vance, how did you... What are you doing here? You weren't at the corner. I got worried." Carol looked at the paper in her hands, then at him. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. "It's Miguel. He was arrested last night." "Arrested? Why?" "Shoplifting," she whispered, her voice laden with shame. "He tried to steal food from a grocery store. He said it was for Anna, that she was hungry, and I didn't have money for dinner." Michael felt a pang in his chest. While he spent fortunes on flowers that Carol didn't even need, her brother was starving to the point of stealing food. "How much is the bail?" he asked, already taking out his cell phone. $1,000, Carol replied, tears beginning to stream down her face. "I don't have that money. It will take months to get it." "I'll pay it," Michael said without hesitating. "No." Carol stepped back, shaking her head vigorously. "I already received too much from you. I can't accept charity." "It's not charity, Carol. It's help. Something that people who care do for each other." "But we barely know each other," she protested. "Why would you do this?" Michael approached slowly, seeing the despair and pride fighting on her face. "Because I care about you, more than I should, considering that you're right, we barely know each other." Carol stared at him for a long moment, seeing something in his eyes that made her question everything she believed about rich men and their motivations. There was sincerity there, but also an intensity that scared her. "If you accept my help," Michael said carefully, "I promise I won't charge anything in return. Just keep being who you are." It was a strange promise, but Carol was desperate. She nodded reluctantly, knowing that she was indebting herself to a man she barely knew, but unable to leave her brother in jail. 3 hours later, Miguel was free. Michael had made a few calls, paid the bail, and even managed to get the charges dropped in exchange for community service. When the three met at the police station door, the gratitude in Carol's eyes was mixed with a new awareness. She was now connected to Michael in a way that she couldn't simply undo. "How can I repay you for this?" she asked as they walked. "Agree to have dinner with me tomorrow," Michael said impulsively. "A real place. Let me get to know you better." Carol knew that accepting would be crossing a definite line, entering an unknown and potentially dangerous territory. But the man who had saved her brother without asking for anything in return had awakened something in her that she couldn't ignore. "All right," she agreed, unknowingly sealing a fate that would change both of their lives forever. The restaurant that Michael chose was discreet but elegant, far from the spotlight of New York high society. Carol had borrowed a simple black dress from her neighbor and spent the entire afternoon getting ready, nervous as she had never been before. When Michael saw her getting out of the taxi he had sent, he was speechless. Her natural beauty, enhanced by the special care, was dazzling. "You look beautiful," he said, offering his arm. Carol blushed, not used to compliments. "Thank you. This place is impressive." During dinner, the barriers between them slowly crumbled. Michael talked about the pressure of carrying the family legacy, about how he had lost the ability to trust people. Carol shared her fears about her siblings' future, her sleepless nights doing bills that never added up. "Sometimes I feel like I'm failing them," she confessed, playing with the napkin. "Miguel is rebellious, Anna is growing up too fast, and I'm just a flower vendor trying to be a mom and dad at the same time." "You're doing more than many biological parents do," Michael said with conviction. "Your dedication is admirable." "Easy to say when you have money to solve the problems," Carol replied, then immediately regretted the harshness. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "You're right," Michael interrupted. I really don't know what it's like to struggle to survive." The moment of tension was broken when Carol's phone rang. It was Anna, crying desperately. "Carol, you need to come now." Miguel disappeared and left a note saying he was going to fix things his way. "I'm scared." Carol paled instantly. "Where are you? Have you looked in the places he usually goes?" Michael watched her transformation, seeing the delicate woman turn into a protective and determined sister. Without hesitating, he signaled the waiter. "Let's go," he said, already getting up. "My driver is outside." "No, Mr. Vance, this is my problem." "Carol," he held her hands firmly. "Let me help, please." In the car, as they cut through the New York night traffic, Carol explained that Miguel had gotten involved with some neighborhood kids who were doing small hustles to earn quick money. She feared he was planning something more serious to pay off the debt of gratitude he felt for Michael having paid his bail. "It's my fault," she murmured. "He feels humiliated for having been saved by a stranger." "It's not your fault," Michael said firmly. "It's my responsibility. I should have thought about his pride." They spent 2 hours looking for Miguel in the outer boroughs. Michael, who had never set foot in low-income neighborhoods or tenements, was confronted with a reality that existed parallel to his world of luxury. He saw Carol greet neighbors, ask about her brother, with a familiarity that spoke of years of community and mutual care. Finally, they found Miguel in an abandoned area near the East River, along with 3 other boys. They had planned to rob a jewelry store, but at the last hour Miguel had backed out and was trying to convince the others to do the same. "Miguel!" Carol shouted, running to him. "For God's sake, what were you thinking?" "I was thinking about our dignity," the boy exploded. "I'm tired of seeing you humiliate yourself, of accepting handouts from a rich boy." "It's not a handout," Michael intervened, approaching calmly. "And I'm not a rich boy." "Oh, no?" Miguel stared at him defiantly. "Then what are you? Why are you interested in my sister, a poor woman, uneducated, who sells flowers on the street?" The question echoed in the silence of the night. The other boys watched the scene with curiosity. Carol held her breath, waiting for the answer that would define everything. Michael looked at Carol, saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the way she awaited an answer that could destroy the fragile trust that had been built between them. And then he did something he hadn't done in years. He told the absolute truth. "Because your sister is the first genuine person I've met in 20 years, he said, without taking his eyes off Carol. "Because she makes me want to be a better man. Because when I'm with her, I remember what it's like to feel something real." The silence that followed was deafening. Miguel lowered his guard, surprised by the raw honesty of the response. Carol felt tears welling up, not of sadness, but of something she couldn't name. "Miguel," Michael said, turning to the boy, "I understand your pride. I would do the same thing in your place, but your sister doesn't need protection from me. She needs protection from a world that doesn't recognize her value." It was at that moment that everything changed. Miguel, touched by Michael's sincerity, began to cry, tears of relief, frustration, and a pain he had carried for years. Carol ran to hug him, and Michael stood there, watching the way she cared for her brother with a tenderness that made him fully understand what he felt for her. On the way back, in the back seat of the car, while Miguel dozed off leaning on his sister, Carol whispered to Michael, "Thank you for everything, Carol," he said softly. "There's something you need to know." She looked at him questioningly. "I'm not just a successful businessman. I'm much richer than you imagined. My company is in the headlines. I have international business, wealth that—" He stopped, seeing her expression changing. "I didn't want you to find out like this, but you deserve to know who you're dealing with." Carol was silent for a long moment, processing the information. Finally, she whispered, "Why did you tell me now?" "Because after what happened today, after what I felt seeing you with your brother, I realized I can no longer pretend to be just an ordinary man who buys flowers. I'm falling in love with you, Carol, And you need to know exactly who you're falling in love with." The words hung in the air between them. Carol felt the world spin, finally understanding the dimension of the abyss that separated them. It wasn't just a difference in class. It was an entire universe of differences that made any relationship between them a practical impossibility. But when she looked at Michael, she saw the same vulnerable man who had saved her brother, who had cared enough to spend the night looking for a boy he barely knew. The money hadn't changed that. "Me too," she whispered, almost inaudibly. "I'm falling in love too." It was a confession that changed everything and solved nothing. As the car cut through the New York night, both knew they had entered dangerous territory. Michael would have to face the expectations of his family and his social world. Carol would have to deal with the pressures of a relationship that could destroy the precarious balance of her life. But at that moment, with Miguel sleeping between them and the silent city outside, nothing else mattered besides the fact that they had found something real in a world full of artifice. It was the beginning of a war against everything and everyone who would try to separate them. In the following 3 weeks, Michael and Carol lived in a parallel world, creating secret encounters that became the center of their existences. Michael changed his routine completely, canceling social engagements and making excuses to leave the office earlier. Carol, in turn, began to close her flower stand later when she knew he would pass by to pick her up. The encounters were simple but intense. Walks in Central Park, conversations in small cafes, visits to places that Carol showed with pride. A community library where she had taught Miguel to read. A small playground where she played with Anna as a child. Michael discovered a New York he had never seen, a city made of community and solidarity instead of competition and isolation. "You're changing everything in me," Michael confessed one afternoon as they watched Anna play in a playground. "I can't recognize myself anymore." Carol held his hand, intertwining her fingers. "Maybe you're just remembering who you always were, before you had to protect yourself from the world." It was true. With Carol, Michael felt free to be vulnerable, to talk about fears and dreams that he had buried years ago. With him, Carol discovered a version of herself that was allowed to dream beyond survival, to imagine a future that included personal happiness. But keeping the relationship a secret was becoming increasingly difficult. Helen noticed the changes in Michael's schedule and began to ask more direct questions. Robert Vance increasingly pressured him about Patricia Almeida, who had started to appear at the office frequently, always with elegant excuses to see Michael. The situation exploded on a Thursday when Patricia arrived at the office unannounced and found Michael on the phone with Carol, laughing in a way she had never seen. The conversation was intimate, affectionate, completely different from the professional tone he maintained with everyone. "Sorry to interrupt," Patricia said when Michael hung up, her voice icy. "I didn't know you were busy with personal matters." "Patricia," Michael greeted, immediately tense. "I wasn't expecting you today." Evidently, she sat in the chair in front of his desk, crossing her legs elegantly. "Michael, we need to talk. About us. About the future our families planned." "There is no us, Patricia. There never was." "Oh, but there should be," she smiled coldly, "especially considering the current circumstances." Michael felt a chill down his spine. "What circumstances?" Patricia opened her designer handbag and took out a series of photographs. They were images of Michael and Carol together, walking hand in hand, talking intimately at the cafe, him helping her out of the car. The photos had been taken from afar, but they were unmistakably compromising. "Imagine if these photographs reached the press," Patricia said casually. "The great Michael Vance, heir to one of the most traditional families in New York, having an affair with a flower vendor. The journalists would be fascinated." "This is blackmail," Michael said, his voice dangerously low. "This is protection," she corrected. "Protection of your reputation, the family's business, the future you built, One word from me in the Right Society column and your little girlfriend becomes the talk of New York. Michael imagined Carol being chased by paparazzi, being publicly humiliated, having her privacy shattered. The simple idea filled him with a fury he had never felt. "What do you want?" he asked through clenched teeth. "What I've always wanted, an official engagement, a wedding that unites our families, and for you to end this whim immediately." "What if I refuse?" Patricia stood up gracefully. "Then tomorrow morning your florist will wake up famous, and not in the way she would like." After Patricia left, Michael was alone in his office, staring at the photographs scattered on the table. Each image showed moments of genuine happiness, something so rare in his life that it seemed unreal now. Meanwhile, Carol was at home helping Anna with her math homework when Miguel arrived, visibly agitated. "Carol, you need to see this," he said, showing her his cell phone. "They're talking about you in the school group." It was a link to a city gossip blog. The headline made Carol's blood run cold. "Multi-millionaire tycoon has secret romance with street vendor." There was no photo of her, but the description was too detailed to be a coincidence. "How did they find out?" Carol murmured, her hands trembling. "I don't know, but it's going to get worse," Miguel said, his face grim. "One of the girls at school said her mother works at a major newspaper. They're looking for you." Carol felt the world collapse. She imagined reporters at her door, photographers following her to work, her simple life being exposed and ridiculed for public entertainment. Worse, she imagined the impact this would have on Miguel and Anna, who already faced discrimination for being poor. When Michael called an hour later, she almost didn't answer. "Carol, have you seen it?" he asked, his voice strained. "I have." She took a deep breath. "Michael, I think we need to stop this before it gets worse." "No." The answer was immediate and firm. "I won't let them separate us." "You don't understand," Carol said, tears beginning to flow. "I can't handle this exposure. My siblings can't. Our life is private, simple. If this turns into a circus—" "I'll fix it," Michael promised. "I'll find a way to stop this." "How? By buying all the journalists, silencing the entire city, all the press?" Carol laughed bitterly. "Your world is bigger than mine, Michael, and I can't fight against it." That night, both stayed awake, knowing they had reached a point of no return. The love they had discovered was being tested for the first time, and the forces against them were too powerful to be ignored. The next morning, Michael woke up to a call from Robert. "Michael, have you seen the papers?" His uncle's voice was altered. "Your adventure is in 3 different society columns. The board of shareholders is in a panic. It's just gossip, Uncle. Gossip that is affecting the company's stock," Robert exploded. "Conservative investors are questioning your seriousness." Patricia Almeida called, offering an elegant solution to this situation. Michael understood immediately. Patricia had partially fulfilled her threat, creating enough pressure to force him to make a decision, but still holding the most compromising cards in case he didn't cooperate. "You have 24 hours to resolve this," Robert continued, "or the board will take drastic measures." When Michael arrived at the corner where Carol always stood, he found the place empty. A nearby vendor told him that she had rushed out early in the morning after being approached by journalists who were asking questions about her relationship with the tycoon Michael Vance. Michael felt his chest tighten. Patricia had begun the second phase of her plan, and Carol was paying the price. He had brought chaos to the life of the only person who had given him peace, and now he needed to choose between protecting her and fighting for her. It was a choice that would define not only their future, but the man he really was beneath all the wealth and power. The game had begun, and the next 24 hours would determine whether the love that had been born between opposite worlds would be strong enough to survive the war that was just beginning. Friday morning began with Carol being awakened by insistent knocks on the door. It was 6 in the morning, and she imagined it was some neighbor with an emergency. When she opened the door, she found 3 reporters with cameras and microphones. Carol Mendez, we'd like to ask you a few questions about your relationship with Michael Vance. She tried to close the door, but one of the men stopped her. Is it true that you met when you were selling flowers on the street? How did a street vendor manage to conquer one of the most coveted bachelors in the country? Please, leave, Carol asked, desperate. I have nothing to declare. Sources close to the Vance family suggest that you may be pregnant. Is that true? The question was like a slap. Carol paled, understanding the dimension of the humiliation that was being orchestrated. Ina appeared behind her, frightened by the loud voices. Carol, who are these people? Nobody, Carol replied, slamming the door shut and leaning against it, her heart racing. An hour later, her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Neighbors, acquaintances, even strangers had somehow gotten her number. When she finally answered a call from Michael, she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Carol, where are you? I'm coming there. Don't come, she screamed. It will only make it worse. There are reporters at the door of the boarding house, at the spot where I work. I can't leave the house. I'll fix this, Michael promised. I'm going to sue all of them. Michael, stop! Carol's voice was broken. You don't understand. It's in all the papers. They say I'm a gold digger, that I got pregnant on purpose to trap you, that my whole family is criminal because of Miguel. They made up that I have affairs with other rich men. On the other end of the line, Michael felt the fury growing with each word. Patricia had crossed all boundaries, destroying not only Carol, but her entire family. None of that is true, he said firmly. People know it's a lie. People believe what they want to believe, Carol replied, crying now. And it's easier to believe that a poor woman is a con artist than to imagine that you really became interested in someone like me. At that moment, Robert Vance entered Michael's office without knocking. Behind him came 3 members of the company's board of directors, all with somber expressions. Michael, we need to talk, now. I'm busy, Michael said, without hanging up the phone. No, you're not. Robert took the phone from his nephew's hand and hung up. Your little game is over. The next 30 minutes were the most humiliating of Michael's life. The board presented an ultimatum. Either he immediately distanced himself from Carol and announced his engagement to Patricia, or he would be removed from the presidency of the company. The shares had fallen 15% in 2 hours. Conservative investors were withdrawing funds, and the family's reputation was in tatters. You have 2 hours to decide, Robert said coldly. And if you choose this woman, you will have nothing left of the Vance family. No money, no name, no protection. Meanwhile, Carol faced her own crisis. The owner of the boarding house had come up to talk, clearly embarrassed. Carol, dear, you know I care about you, said Mrs. Jenkins, but the other tenants are complaining about the reporters, and the commotion is hurting everyone. I think it's best if you find another place. It was the final blow. Carol understood that she had not only lost Michael, she had lost her home, her job, her privacy. All for having fallen in love with a man who lived in a world where she should never have entered. Miguel, who had gone out to try to work, returned with a bruised face. What happened? Carol asked, alarmed. Some guys recognized me on the street. They said I was the brother of the tramp who's going out with Michael Vance. Miguel wiped the blood from his lip. I fought back, but there were too many of them. Carol felt the world collapse completely. It wasn't just her who was paying the price. Miguel and Anna were being hit as well. Ina, who still didn't fully understand what was happening, asked why she could no longer go to school without the other children asking mean questions. When Michael finally managed to get to the boarding house in the late afternoon, he found Carol packing the family's few belongings. Carol, what are you doing? What I should have done from the beginning, she replied without looking at him. Getting out of your life before it completely destroys mine. You can't do this. We talked about facing the difficulties together. Carol finally turned to him, and Michael saw that something had broken in her eyes. Together. Michael, do you have any idea what my family went through today? Miguel was beaten up in the street. Anna had to leave school because the children were picking on her. We lost our home, all because I was foolish enough to believe that people from different worlds can love each other without consequences. I'll fix this, Michael insisted, trying to hold her hands. I'm going to sue all the newspapers. I'm going to... With what right? Carol exploded, pulling away. You think money solves everything? That you can buy my dignity back? That you can erase the humiliation my siblings suffered? Carol, please. No, the tears flowed freely now. You told me once that everyone has a price. Congratulations, Michael. You found mine. I can't pay with my siblings' safety for a love that should never have existed. Miguel appeared at the door, carrying a small suitcase. Carol, the cab's here. Where are you going? Michael asked, desperate. Away from you, Carol replied, taking Anna by the hand. We're going to our aunt's house in Poughkeepsie, where no one knows the gold digger who tried to take advantage of the great Michael Vance. Carol, wait. Michael tried to follow them, but Miguel positioned himself between them. Leave her alone, the boy said with a forced maturity. You've done enough damage already. Michael watched helplessly as the family he had learned to love disappeared into the cab. Carol didn't look back once, but he saw her shoulders trembling with sobs through the rear window. 2 hours later, he was in the office, signing the official statement prepared by Robert. The text announced that the speculations about his relationship were unfounded, that he was committed only to the family's business, and that there would soon be positive news about his personal life, a clear reference to the arranged engagement with Patricia. You made the right choice, Robert said, satisfied. That woman would have ruined everything we built. Michael signed the document without saying a word. When Robert and the advisors left, he was alone in his office, looking out the window in the direction of the corner where it had all begun. The flower stand was empty, as if Carol had never existed. For the first time since adolescence, Michael Vance cried, not only for the loss of Carol, but for the terrible realization that he had become exactly the type of man he had always despised. Someone who sacrificed what really mattered to maintain appearances and power. On the road to Poughkeepsie, Carol watched the landscape pass by the blurry bus window. Anna slept in her lap, and Miguel was silent beside them. She had made the most difficult decision of her life, choosing to protect her family instead of fighting for her love. But as the lights of New York City disappeared in the distance, Carol wondered if she would ever be able to forgive herself for giving up on the only man who had managed to see her soul through all the simplicity. Both were broken, separated by forces greater than them, believing that they had lost forever the only chance at true happiness they had ever found. 3 months had passed since Carol left New York City. In Poughkeepsie, she had gotten a job at a local flower shop, and Miguel had resumed his studies at a public school. Anna, more resilient than they imagined, had quickly made new friends. Life was reorganizing itself, but Carol felt as if a part of herself had been left behind in the city. Every morning, she woke up thinking about Michael. Every night, she wondered if she had made the right decision. The New York papers still arrived in town, and she avoided looking at the society columns, but she knew that he had announced his engagement to Patricia Almeida 2 weeks after her departure. You need to move on, Carol, said Aunt Martha one afternoon, while Carol was arranging a wedding bouquet. That man has already forgotten you. But Carol knew it wasn't true. Something in Michael's eyes on that last day, something in the desperate way he had tried to follow her, said otherwise. There was pain there, a pain that mirrored her own. In New York, Michael lived like a ghost of himself. Business thrived under his mechanical administration, but Robert noticed the lack of passion, the absence of the strategic brilliance that had always characterized him. The engagement with Patricia was a cold theater, performed at family dinners and social events where he smiled for the cameras and died inside. You need to try harder, Patricia murmured during a benefit cocktail party. People are starting to notice that you look like a living dead man. Michael took another sip of champagne, watching the New York elite enjoy themselves while he counted the minutes to be able to leave. He had lost 30 pounds, slept 3 hours a night, and his only joy was the memory of simple afternoons with a woman who had loved him for who he really was. The change began on a Thursday afternoon when Helen entered Michael's office with a worried expression. "Mr. Vance, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent and refers to Ms. Carroll." Michael's heart stopped. "Send him in." To his surprise, who entered was Miguel. The boy had grown in recent months, was taller, and had a determination in his eyes that hadn't existed before. "We need to talk," Miguel said, closing the door behind him. "Miguel, what are you doing here?" "I found out something you need to know." The boy sat in the chair in front of the desk with a maturity that impressed Michael. "About who really leaked the story to the papers?" Michael leaned forward, interested. "It wasn't an accident, and it wasn't journalistic investigation," Miguel continued. "It was all planned. A blonde, rich woman paid reporters to follow you and take pictures." "Patricia," Michael murmured, feeling the anger rising. "She offered $50,000 to a private photographer who knows our neighborhood. I know, because he's my friend's cousin and felt guilty after seeing what happened to Carol." Miguel took an envelope from his backpack. "Here are copies of the proof of payment and a recording where she explains exactly what she wanted. To destroy my sister's reputation, to force you to come back to her." Michael opened the envelope with trembling hands. The evidence was irrefutable. Patricia had orchestrated everything from day one, hiring private detectives to follow them, paying journalists to create a scandal, inventing lies to destroy Carol. "Why are you showing me this?" Michael asked. Miguel took a deep breath. "Because my sister is dying of sadness. She tries to hide it, but I hear her crying every night. She works like a machine during the day, but has lost that light she always had in her eyes. She hates me," Michael said sadly, "and she's right. I brought this into her life. Her." "No," Miguel corrected. "That Patricia brought. You were just dumb enough to let her blackmail you." The boy stood up. "Carol thinks you chose that woman because she's not worth it. But I know my sister. She would never forgive herself if she didn't fight for what she loves." "Miguel, there's one thing you don't know about Carol," the boy continued. "She's never dated anyone seriously. She's never let any man get really close. You know why?" Michael shook his head. "Because when our parents died, she made a promise that she would only allow herself to love someone when she was absolutely sure it was forever. When she let you into her life, it was because she believed you two had a future." The words hit Michael like a punch to the stomach. Carol had given him not only her heart, but a trust that she had never given to anyone, and he had failed her in the worst way possible. "What can I do?" he asked, genuinely lost. "Fight for her," Miguel said simply. "The way she would fight for you if she knew the truth." After Miguel left, Michael was alone with the evidence scattered on the table. For the first time in months, he felt something besides despair. He felt determination. Patricia had played dirty, manipulated the situation to get what she wanted, and in the process, she had destroyed the only pure and true thing he had found. But the game wasn't over yet. Michael called his personal lawyer, then the company's head of security, and finally a contact in the press whom he trusted. If Patricia wanted a war, he would give her a war. But this time, he would fight for the right reasons. As he planned his strategy, a single image motivated him. Carol in her simple dress, smiling at him in that first coffee shop, believing that he was just a kind man who bought flowers. She had seen the best of him when not even he knew it still existed. Now it was his turn to prove that he deserved the faith she had placed in him. The final confrontation was approaching, and this time, Michael would not allow anything or anyone to stop him from getting back the woman who had given him a reason to live. The Vance Foundation Gala was being held at the Plaza Hotel, and all of New York's elite were present. Patricia circulated through the ballroom arm in arm with Michael, displaying the engagement ring he had given her in a cold and protocolary ceremony. To the observers, they formed the perfect couple. Beautiful, rich, powerful. But Michael had other plans for that night. "Attention, ladies and gentlemen," he said into the microphone when it was his turn to speak. "Tonight is a special night for me, and I would like to share something important with all of you." Patricia smiled beside him, waiting for the official announcement of the wedding date. Robert Vance nodded approvingly from the front row. "A few months ago, I met an extraordinary woman," Michael began, and Patricia felt her smile freeze. "A woman who taught me the true meaning of love, dignity, and courage." A murmur ran through the ballroom. The cameras of the journalists present turned to the stage. This woman was the victim of a cruel smear campaign, orchestrated by someone who claimed to be my friend. Michael looked directly at Patricia, who had paled completely. Someone who used lies, blackmail, and manipulation to destroy an innocent person. "Michael, what are you doing?" Patricia whispered, trying to pull him away from the microphone. "I'm doing what I should have done months ago," he replied, gently pushing her away. "I'm telling the truth." Michael then revealed everything. The photographs taken without consent, the payments to reporters, the lies planted in the media, the explicit blackmail. He showed the documents that Miguel had brought, the compromising recordings, the irrefutable evidence of Patricia's manipulation. "Carol Mendez is a woman of integrity, a hard worker who dedicates her life to caring for her orphaned siblings," he declared to the silent ballroom. "She never asked me for anything, never took advantage of me, never had any intention other than to be genuinely good. And I lost her because I was too cowardly to protect her when she needed me most." Patricia tried to leave the stage, but Michael held her by the arm. "No," he said firmly. "You created this spectacle. Now you're going to watch it to the end." "I will resign from the presidency of the company," Michael continued, ignoring the muffled protests from the audience. "I will renounce the family's wealth, if necessary, because I have learned that having everything means nothing if you don't have the right person to share it with." He took the engagement ring off Patricia's finger, returning it publicly. "This engagement is cancelled, and if anyone in this room tries to harm Carol Mendez or her family again, they will have to deal with me personally." The ballroom exploded in murmurs and flashes of cameras. Robert went up on stage furious, but Michael was already leaving. 3 hours later, Michael was driving his Ferrari on the New York State Thruway, heading to Poughkeepsie. He had spent the last few days finding out where Carol was, and now nothing would stop him from going to her. He arrived at the flower shop the next morning when Carol was arranging the first flowers of the day. She was thinner, paler, but she still had that natural grace that had captivated him from the first moment. "Michael?" she whispered, disbelieving. "Hi, Carol. What? How did you find me?" "It doesn't matter." He approached slowly, as if she were a frightened animal that could run away at any moment. "I came to apologize and to tell the truth." "Michael, don't. Please," he begged. "Just listen to me. 5 minutes." Carol looked around the empty store, then nodded reluctantly. Michael told everything. Patricia's blackmail, the board's threats, his cowardice in not fighting for her when he should have. He showed the evidence that Miguel had brought, explained how he had exposed Patricia publicly the night before. "I gave up everything," he said at the end. "The company, the wealth, the family name. I have nothing left besides what I managed to build with my own work." Carol was silent, absorbing everything she had heard. "Why?" she asked finally. "Because you taught me that having everything means nothing if you lose your soul in the process." Michael knelt right there, in the middle of the flower shop. "Because I love you. I love your kindness, your strength, the way you take care of your siblings, how you see beauty in simple things." Tears began to stream down Carol's face. "Michael, I know I don't deserve another chance," he continued. "I know I failed you when you needed me most, but if you let me, I will spend the rest of my life proving that I deserve the love you gave me." "What if I say yes?" asked Carol, her voice trembling. "What if we try again? What happens when you regret giving up everything for a flower vendor?" Michael stood up and held her face in his hands. Then I'll remember that this flower vendor saved me from an empty life, taught me what true love is, and gave me a real family. Your family hates me, Carol whispered. Then we'll make our own family. Michael smiled, the first true smile in months. You, me, Miguel, Anna, and as many children as you want to have. Carol laughed through tears, seeing in his eyes the same vulnerability that had captivated her months ago. But now there was something more. There was determination, courage, the promise of a man who had chosen love above all else. Are you sure? She asked one last time. I've never been sure of anything in my life, Michael replied, except that I love you and that I want to spend every day I have left proving it. Carol leaned forward and kissed him, a kiss that spoke of forgiveness, hope, and new beginnings. When they separated, she whispered, "Then let's go home." Our home. 6 months later, they were married in a simple ceremony in the church in the neighborhood where Carol had grown up. Miguel was the best man, Anna was the maid of honor, and half the community was present to celebrate the love that had overcome all barriers. Michael built a new company, smaller but prosperous, focused on social technology. Carol opened a floristry school for underprivileged youth. Miguel got a full scholarship, and Anna discovered a talent for painting. They lived in a comfortable but unpretentious house, where Michael learned that true wealth was in lazy family Sundays, in laughter at the dinner table, in the simplicity of waking up next to the woman he loved. "Do you regret it?" Carol asked one night, as they watched the stars from the porch. "Regret what?" Michael replied, pulling her closer. "Having given up everything for me." Michael looked at the illuminated house behind them, where Miguel was helping Anna with her homework, where the dog they had adopted slept on the couch, where every room was filled with love and real life. "Carol," he said, kissing her forehead, "I didn't give up everything. I gained everything. And for the first time in their lives, both the ex-tycoon and the ex-flower vendor knew exactly what it meant to be completely happy. They had discovered that true love was not just a fairy tale fantasy, but a daily choice to put the other above anything else, a decision to build together something more valuable than any fortune. Love had won, and they had a whole life ahead of them to celebrate that victory.